I was born into affluence. My father was a successful construction entrepreneur, and being an only child, I had the luxury of his full support. However, my beautiful and kind mother fell ill with a severe disease, and after battling it for 2 years, she passed away when I was just 9 years old. 2 years later, my father remarried his new wife, being only 15 years older than me. Can you imagine? She was just 26. People usually wait at least 3 years before remarrying after the death of their spouse, but I guess my father was in a hurry. Perhaps he was looking for a new mother to care for his young son. Looking back, I suppose his wealth made it easier for him to attract a younger wife. My stepmother was young and pretty, standing at 5'6", and was also very kind. My father seemed to enjoy his newlywed life with her. As I grew older, I began to realize how beautiful she was, almost as beautiful as a celebrity. I could say that my fairly uneventful adolescence was due to her kindness and care. I got accepted into a prestigious university, and my father's business continued to prosper. Although I didn't need to work for money, my father advised me that it would be a good experience to do some part-time work. So I worked on a construction site during the holidays, mixing cement with water. The wages I earned felt incredibly valuable after a hard day's work. One day, I bought a watermelon with my wages and gave it to my stepmother. She patted me on the back gently, which somehow made me blush. We lived happily as a family. After serving in the military, I was waiting to return to school while working part-time. Then one day, I came home to find my father's belongings scattered about the living room. My stepmother was crying, and when I asked her what happened, she told me that my father had cheated on her. In her anger, she had thrown all of his clothes from the wardrobe into the living room. My father left the house, claiming that my stepmother was overly attached, since their daughter was already 10 years old. My stepmother was left alone to raise her, while my father agreed to provide only the necessary living expenses. I was angry at my father for betraying his young wife. I wanted to comfort my stepmother, so I started buying her nice meals with the money I earned from my part-time job, and also gave her some pocket money. Despite the circumstances, my stepmother never lost her gentle smile and took good care of me and my sister. I was busy after returning to school, and my father's separation period just seemed to extend. Looking at my father's life, I decided not to date for a while and focused on studying. As my sister grew older and her tuition fees increased, my stepmother had to contact my father for additional support. Occasionally, I saw her sigh and sit down in exhaustion. One day, I suggested that we order some late-night snacks. My stepmother ordered chicken and beer. My sister said she was tired and went to bed, leaving my stepmother and me at the dining table. As we shared stories and drank, she started crying, saying that my father hadn't contacted her except for when he sent money, that he had betrayed her. Despite the 20-year age difference, that he didn't even ask about his daughter, and that just sending money doesn't make him a father. I gently patted my stepmother's slender shoulders, comforting her, saying, "Stepmother, Dad will come back someday. Let's live well until then." She had too much to drink and went to her room to sleep. I was about to go to my room after cleaning up when my stepmother softly called out to me, "Son, I've felt so lonely. Things were good when your father and I first got married, but after we had our daughter, he only had eyes for her. I was always complimented for my youthful looks, but your father began to distance himself from me. During that time, you were growing up so well, buying me delicious food, even giving me pocket money from the earnings of your part-time job. I'm grateful. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I started to see you as a man. I've wanted to confess my feelings for a while now, but I've been too shy. This isn't drunk talk. I'm confessing to you with the help of alcohol. Can you be my man tonight?" she asked. I too was a bit drunk, and her confession seemed to make things fall into place. I must admit, I had often fantasized about my stepmother. That night, I agreed to be with her. We made love, and my stepmother, who was in a man's arms after nearly 3 years, began to sob. I told her not to cry, that I would comfort her and help her forget her resentment towards my father. From then on, when my sister was at school and I had no classes, my stepmother and I had our intimate moments. We made love in the master bedroom, drove around in her car, visited gourmet restaurants. To others, we may have looked like a couple of a similar age, rather than a stepmother and stepson. Seeing her leaning on my arm, I felt content. Our relationship lasted for about a year, and I graduated and found a job. I rented a studio apartment near my workplace, but I spent 3 nights a week at her place, fearing she might feel lonely. I gave her all of my first salary. I confess, I visited home more often because of my relationship with her. On my birthday, she prepared a grand dinner, and my sister gave me a shirt as a gift, making it a memorable day. That night, my sister went to bed early again, and my stepmother, dressed up specially, spent the night with me. Then one day, my father came back home. My stepmother accepted his apology and decided to take him back. She thanked me for the wonderful time we had and suggested that we should go back to being just stepmother and son. She also insisted that our secret should be taken to the grave. The reason, I believe, was because I wasn't earning as much as my father. I was barely making ends meet, paying for my living expenses and saving a bit. With my sister's tuition fees increasing, my father's return was a lifeline my stepmother couldn't afford to lose. My parents looked awkward together, but seemed to be trying to mend their relationship, and all I could do was watch. I stopped visiting home except for holidays and birthdays. I occasionally exchanged formal greetings with my stepmother, but that was about it. Yes, that was good enough for me. And I remember my stepmother with happiness. I'll write a review. My stepmother seemed to be getting along well with my father, and it had been 3 months since I had any interaction with her. She occasionally contacted me, but I avoided meeting her with various excuses. Then one day, just before the end of the workday, I got a call at my office desk. Someone was looking for me, so I hurried out. It was fall, and the wind was gently blowing. My stepmother was standing in the lobby of my office. She was wearing a green dress and a cardigan, and she looked stunning. The employees who were leaving work kept stealing glances at her. I introduced her to a coworker, who joked how lucky I was to have such a young and beautiful mother. I always felt this way when I was with my stepmother. She was always beautiful, and I was proud of her. We went to a nearby restaurant and ordered steak, pasta, and salad. We also ordered wine, but my stepmother didn't look happy. She asked if I had been doing well and why I was avoiding her calls. I told her that I couldn't be selfish, that it was important for her and my father to get along. So I had no choice but to avoid her calls, even though it hurt me. She said she had been having difficulty eating. When I asked her what was wrong, she said she was constantly nauseous. I asked, could it be related to our relationship? She said she was scared to go to the hospital alone, so she came to see me. She said she was getting along well with my father, but she wasn't sure about his true feelings. He was trying, but he had cheated once, so she couldn't be sure he wouldn't do it again. I felt sorry for her. We quickly finished our meal and rushed to a drugstore that was about to close. I bought a pregnancy test and handed it to her. She said she wanted to see my apartment, so we bought some beer and snacks and went to my place. She looked around my messy apartment and scolded me, saying, "You can't live like this, just because you're a man living alone. No matter how busy you are, you should always keep your place clean." She said she hadn't been able to take the pregnancy test because she was scared of feeling nauseous and missing her period, but she said she would take the test the next morning because it's more accurate in the morning. We started drinking beer. She said, I missed you so much. Were you surprised when I showed up out of the blue? Please answer my calls. Let's go back to the way we were. Promise?" She looked at me with pleading eyes. Even though I knew what she was worried about, we became one that night. I took her home in a taxi early in the morning and couldn't sleep. When the morning came, I received a text message from her. I took a pregnancy test. "There's nothing to worry about," it said. I can't tell you how relieved I was. We met again that evening, and she told me that she had been to the gynecologist because her periods were irregular and she had gotten a shot. But because she was constantly nauseous, she was advised to go to an internist. She had an endoscopy a few days later and was diagnosed with chronic gastritis. It wasn't as serious as we feared, and we were relieved. Our relationship returned to the way it used to be. Sometimes my stepmother would come to my apartment. Before I got off work and prepare a delicious meal, we would sit across each other and eat, then go to the bedroom and have a good time. One day, after work, I walked into my apartment to find my stepmother, sitting there with a furious look on her face.